I really thought this guy couldn't understand my hometown dialect. So every time I talked to him, I'd secretly call him my wife in my dialect, right to his face. Then, during the second semester of my sophomore year, my family suddenly moved, and I transferred back to my hometown. Later, I found out he'd gone around asking my classmates where I was from. Apparently, he really wanted to know. Fast forward to the first day of college military training. The instructor lined everyone up according to their home province. And somehow, he ended up standing right beside me. Then he turned his head and spoke in my hometown dialect. "Long time no see, husband." His pronunciation was so perfect, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. The September sun was already roasting my brain. But at that moment, I froze like I'd just been struck by lightning. My face probably looked somewhere between absolute shock and someone suffering from food poisoning. That dialect comes from a tiny county that almost nobody else in China understands. That exact dialect. I've been using it as my own private encrypted channel since freshman year. For an entire year and a half. I secretly called him my wife. At that moment, every memory from high school flashed before my eyes. Back in freshman year Chinese class, he asked to borrow my pen. I handed it over while casually saying, "Here." But in my dialect, I secretly added, "My wife looks so cute today." He took the pen without even looking up. "Thanks." I thought I was completely safe. Then came chemistry class the next semester. The two of us were lab partners. He crouched down to pick up a fallen test tube. His hair slipped behind his ear, revealing the back of his neck. I quietly muttered in my dialect, "I'm doomed. I'm seriously doomed." He simply stood up, handed me the test tube, and said, "Hold this." His expression never changed. So once again, I assumed my secret was perfectly safe. During the New Year's party, he performed on stage. The entire auditorium was dark except for one spotlight shining on him. I couldn't stop clapping. Then I whispered to myself, "My wife even sings like an angel." The classmate beside me turned and asked what I was mumbling. I panicked and made up an excuse. I said everyone should clap louder. But the most dangerous moment came right before our sophomore final exams. He was sitting in front of me. He turned around to ask how to solve a difficult math problem. He leaned in, really close, close enough for me to catch the scent of his shampoo. And my brain instantly blue-screened. Every bit of math I'd memorized completely disappeared. I somehow forced myself to explain the solution. Then quietly whispered in my dialect, "You're way too close. I can't think." He smiled. That was a really clear explanation. "Thanks." Then he turned back around. No strange reaction. He just kept reading. Then went back to solving problems. The two of us were like servers that had never been connected. That's why I was absolutely convinced. My dialect was the safest encrypted communication channel on Earth. There was no way it'd ever fail. It felt more secure than a bank vault. My secret one-man confession system was flawless, absolutely airtight. It had been running for a year and a half without a single accident. Then came the second semester. Just 2 weeks after school started, my dad received a sudden transfer notice. We had to move back home immediately. The notice came on Friday. By Monday, my transfer papers were already finished. I never even got the chance to say goodbye. Not because I didn't want to. I just didn't know how. At best, we were just classmates who borrowed pens from each other, showing up for a heartfelt farewell. Would have felt unbelievably awkward. The day I emptied my locker, I looked at him one last time. He was focused on a math exam paper. His pencil kept moving across the page. He never noticed that I had already left. In my heart, I whispered one last sentence in my hometown dialect. "Goodbye, my wife." Then I walked away. About a month later, one of my former classmates told me something unbelievable. After I transferred out, the Ice Prince went around asking everyone in class where I was actually from. Not just 1 or 2 people. He asked them one by one, almost half the class. I sat on my bed back home, staring at my phone. My heartbeat was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But after forcing myself to calm down for 3 minutes, I convinced myself it meant nothing. Maybe he was just curious because I disappeared so suddenly. Anyone would have wondered. There didn't have to be some hidden meaning behind it. Don't get ahead of yourself. Stop feeding your own delusions. Yeah, don't cope. I locked my phone. Then unlocked it again. And reread that message 17 times. The encryption system I thought was absolutely perfect. The one I believed could never be cracked. Exploded into pieces. Right there in the military training field in front of dozens of freshmen from our province. Completely destroyed. Long time no see, husband. Every single tone was perfect. Even the subtle accent at the end sounded exactly like home. My so-called encrypted channel, from the very beginning, had been nothing more than a single-player game I fooled myself into believing. He understood every single word I'd ever said. Every wife. Even when I whispered that he was standing too close. And I couldn't think straight anymore. Every confession that I believed disappeared into the air. Had never been secret at all. I was the only idiot in the entire story, who never realized the password had already leaked. The moment I looked at him, he looked back at me. There was the faintest smile on his lips. It was tiny, but the emotional damage was absolutely critical. That smile seemed to say, "I know exactly what you've been thinking. And now you know that I know." I forced myself to hold on to the last shred of dignity I had. My voice was barely louder than a whisper. "How do you know our hometown dialect?" He didn't answer. His smile only grew a tiny bit wider. And at that exact moment, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't planning to let me off easy. My knees suddenly turned to jelly. I'm not exaggerating. They literally gave out beneath me. My kneecaps were practically screaming for backup. I was desperately wondering if there was any way I could disappear without anyone noticing. Then a booming voice crashed over the formation. "You there in the front? Who was talking just now? Step forward." The instructor was walking toward us. I instinctively shrank my neck. Then I caught a glimpse of his face. And my other knee instantly gave up too. No way. That was my uncle. My dad's younger brother. After leaving the military, he became one of the officers supervising freshman training at this university. When I applied here, I had absolutely no idea he worked on this campus. Then he saw me. Our eyes met. For about a second and a half. Normally, this would have been the emotional family reunion scene. "Hey, you're here too!" Cue the heartwarming music. Instead, reality chose the hardcore difficulty setting. He looked at me without changing his expression. Then glanced at the Ice Prince. His eyes moved back and forth between us twice. His face became even colder. Then he called my full name. His voice was cold enough to erase the 35 degrees summer heat. During military training, romantic relationships are forbidden. My mouth fell open. I wanted to explain that I wasn't the one who said husband. He was. I was the victim here. I was the one who had my entire hand exposed in front of everyone. I hadn't even worked up the courage to admit I had a crush on him. Yet he announced it to the world using my own hometown dialect. "Step out." 10 laps around the field. I glanced at my uncle's expression. His face made one thing painfully clear. Every extra word out of my mouth would cost me 2 more laps. So I wisely kept my mouth shut. I stepped out and started running. The September heat was brutal. By the 3rd lap, my temples were pounding. Sweat had completely soaked my camouflage uniform. "The only thing still functioning," was the nonstop commentary inside my head. Why didn't I check the instructor list? Before choosing this university? And why didn't my mom tell me my uncle worked here? More importantly, where on earth did the Ice Prince learn my dialect? Seriously, what kind of sins did I commit in my past life? By lap 5, my legs were already filing formal complaints. During the 6th lap, I passed our provincial formation. More than 40 pairs of eyes locked onto me at once. The amount of attention. Give me a brief understanding of what a zoo monkey must feel like. Everyone watching! Everyone judging! The only difference was, monkeys don't have to run punishment laps. Then I heard the Ice Prince's voice from inside the formation. Not too loud. Just loud enough for only me to hear. In my hometown dialect, he said, "Keep going, husband." I almost tripped and planted my face into the dirt. Nobody else understood what he'd just said. But everyone definitely noticed me nearly falling flat on my face. 3 meters away, my uncle's ear twitched. He swear, it actually twitched. like the man had military-grade sonar. The second I slowed down, 5 more laps. I did the math in my head. 10 became 15. 1 lap was 400 meters. 15 laps, 6 kilometers. At noon, without water, this challenge had no winners. By lap 12, I had reached a higher state of existence. My legs were numb. My brain was empty. Random flashes of light kept appearing in my vision. As I ran past my uncle, I sneaked a glance at him. He stood there, with both hands behind his back, expressionless, the perfect military posture. But I could have sworn one of his eyebrows twitched. I had no proof. Maybe sweat was just blurring my vision. Finally, lap 15. I practically dragged my body back into formation. At this point, my legs had developed free will. They informed me that today's cooperation had officially ended. From here on, I was on my own. The Ice Prince looked at me. For a second, he actually seemed worried. Or maybe that was just oxygen deprivation messing with my eyesight. Then he handed me a bottle of water. Ice cold. I had no idea where he got it. When I reached for it, our fingers brushed against each other. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but that tiny uncertainty somehow made those 15 laps feel completely worth it. After military training ended, I returned to my dorm. My legs no longer belonged to me. My roommate leaned over from the top bunk. He looked even happier to see me than my own mother. Dude, you actually survived! He jumped off the bed and helped me into a chair. While handing me some water, he excitedly started retelling today's legendary event. Bro, I heard the whole story. The campus prince called you husband in your own hometown dialect. And the instructor was actually your uncle. You got punished with 15 laps on the spot. Man, you're built different. Seriously, you speedran the Freshman Hall of Fame on day 1 of military training. You unlocked a legendary achievement on your very first day. I took a sip of water. I didn't even have the strength to answer. So, who spread the story? I muttered. My roommate proudly slapped his chest. Me? I was right there. Front row seats. I witnessed the entire disaster. I glanced toward his bunk. Lucky for him, it was the top bunk. My legs couldn't even support me right now. For today, at least, he was safe. Oh, your phone rang a bunch of times. He pointed toward my bedside table. It was your mom. I picked up my phone. The screen lit up. Missed calls. Mom, 7. I stared at that number for a full 3 seconds. My uncle's intelligence network could no longer be described as fast. It had surpassed light speed. It violated the laws of physics. Einstein himself would have sat up just to question this transmission speed. Military training had ended less than 40 minutes ago. and Mom had already called me 7 times, which meant my uncle had probably started reporting everything. While I was only on my 3rd punishment lap, I took a deep breath, then called her back. She answered almost instantly. Not because she'd just picked up the phone. She had obviously been waiting for my call the entire time. Lying in wait. So, you've got a boyfriend now? And you didn't think to tell your family? She came out swinging before I could say a single word. Even my roommate instinctively flinched from the volume. Mom, that's not... Your uncle told me his name is Lu Ruyen, right? Do you know his mother's name is Jo Min? Jo Min was my high school classmate. Excuse me? At that moment, I became convinced that whoever was writing my life was personally targeting me. Mom, please just let me explain. I already talked to Jo Min. My blood pressure immediately leveled up. We were on the phone for 40 minutes. Another critical hit. While I was running 15 laps under the blazing sun, our parents had already completed a full diplomatic summit. Information exchange complete. The efficiency was so ridiculous that I seriously wondered if they shared some kind of quantum communication link. He scored 621 on the college entrance exam. He's studying finance. He's 163 centimeters tall and has never dated anyone. Mom couldn't even hide how satisfied she sounded. She sounded like she'd just won the auction of the century. So I told Jo Min that you scored 635. You're majoring in computer science. You're 181 centimeters tall, and you've never dated either? She said, that's wonderful. And I agreed. We both think you two are a perfect match. Don't you think this is moving just a little too fast? We haven't even officially met each other yet. We've already made plans. Jo Min is bringing him over during National Day. Perfect timing. I gave up. The situation had completely escaped my control. Completely. The moment the Ice Prince greeted me with, "Long time no see, husband," everything started rolling downhill like an avalanche. I wasn't the one pushing the snowball. I was the poor guy getting flattened by it. But Mom wasn't finished. Her tone suddenly shifted. It changed from interrogation to something calm, gentle, and terrifying. I knew that tone all too well. It always meant I was about to hear something that would make me regret answering the phone. Son, you actually met him when you were little. My heart nearly stopped. Not in the romantic movie kind of way. More like a bomb technician discovering a mystery wire. Mom started telling me the story. When you were 3, Jo Min brought 2-year-old Lu Ruyen over to visit. The adults went into the kitchen to prepare lunch. So they left the two of you alone in the living room. Then you tripped. Mom started laughing while she talked. You cried so hard your nose was running. Your mouth was open wide enough to fit an entire egg. The Ice Queen was standing right beside me. Mom, why are you even telling her that? Before I could stop her, I took a picture back then. My hand holding the phone instantly started sweating. Don't worry, I've already sent it to her. My mom's voice had the cheerful tone of someone who had just completed a mission. That cheerful tone confirmed one terrifying fact. When it came to socially eliminating her own son, my mom was unbelievably talented. The very next second, my phone vibrated. A message from the Ice Queen. It was a screenshot. Right there was a picture of 3-year-old me crying with snot running everywhere. And beside it was the chat my mom had literally just sent her. I slowly held my phone a few inches farther away. At that moment, I felt despair reaching into the deepest part of my soul. Gigi, I hung up the call, then collapsed into my chair. My roommate had overheard everything. The way he looked at me changed completely. Like a scientist discovering a brand new species. So, you two even took baths together as kids? No. We just played together for a little while. But your mom said you cried with snot everywhere. Dude, every handsome 3-year-old cries, okay? Yeah? But now the goddess has your baby photo. Don't. He had already pulled out his phone. The speed he typed at made me question reality. This guy had to be a high-speed printer in his previous life. Then he opened the class group chat. I watched in horror as he hit send. Breaking news! Our bro and the goddess from the Dialect squad are childhood sweethearts. They've known each other since they were 3. They played together. They cried together. They even took pictures together. Confirmed personally by bro's own mother. The evidence has already been sent to the goddess. This information has been verified by bro himself. Reliability, 5 stars. Absolutely not fake. Also, both moms have already talked for 40 minutes. National Day meetup is currently being arranged. Stay tuned for future updates. Then he even attached a meme. The chat exploded instantly. Messages started flying in at about 5 per second. No way! Bro actually pulled the campus goddess? Show us the photo! We need proof. So, you've started your grind at age 3? That's destiny, bro. Absolute canon event. I stared at my screen. I've never experienced despair on this level before. Not the dramatic end of the world kind. Not some grand apocalypse. This was painfully specific. Painfully measurable. My ugly childhood crying photo was spreading across the internet at light speed. And I couldn't even figure out where to cut it off. I glanced at my roommate. He had already vaulted onto the top bunk. Sitting cross-legged, smiling down at me like a final boss. Bro, don't come down tonight! Why? Because if you do, I'm ending you. Can those legs even catch me right now? No, he was right. At that point, I couldn't even chase a snail. The group chat notifications sounded like a machine gun. They kept firing all night. At 3 in the morning, I was still awake. Not because I was nervous, but because my roommate kept posting live updates. Right into the class group chat. Latest report, bro still can't sleep. He sighed 17 times. Correction, 18. Correction again, 19. He's entered infinite sigh mode. I buried my face in my pillow. The next morning, I stood in formation with 2 massive dark circles under my eyes. The sun was just as merciless, and so was my will to live. Then the Ice Queen walked over from the next formation. She stopped right in front of me. She looked like she had slept amazingly well. As if last night, she hadn't received a picture of 3-year-old me. Crying my eyes out. Wouldn't leave me with lifelong psychological trauma because of a picture of me with a giant snot bubble. Then my Ice Queen casually lifted her phone and waved the screen right in front of my face. Her lock screen. There I was, 3 years old, my entire face scrunched into one giant wrinkle. Half my face was covered in snot. My mouth was stretched open so wide. It looked physically impossible. Standing beside me was her 2-year-old self, hands behind her back, looking at me like she was judging the most disappointing exhibit in a museum. Absolute humiliation. I swear, my soul left my body for about half a second. Change it. No, seriously. I'm serious too. That picture was taken when I was only 3. So what? It doesn't represent who I am now. Oh, I think it does. The face you made at the end of yesterday's run looked almost exactly the same. A classmate nearby couldn't hold it in anymore. He burst out laughing. I had no idea when he'd wandered over. But what he'd overheard was more than enough gossip to fuel the entire day. What will it take for you to change it? She tilted her head and smiled. Call me wife, in your hometown dialect. I looked around. Hundreds of students were walking all over the training field. The closest person was less than 3 meters away. But a dialect, it's still a dialect. Within 300 meters. Besides the 2 of us, there probably wasn't a third person who could understand it. The problem was, the last time I confidently believed nobody could understand. Things did not end well. The result? She walked right up beside me, looked me straight in the eye, and answered, "Hey, husband! Long time no see!" Yeah, our so-called encrypted communication channel had officially lost all credibility. Just say it. And I'll think about changing the wallpaper. She sounded unbelievably calm. Like she was commenting on how nice the weather was today. If you don't, I might accidentally post that masterpiece in the class group chat. So, are you doing it or not? I slowly closed my eyes. Took one deep breath. Then I lowered my voice, until only the tiny space between us could possibly carry the sound. No one else could have heard a thing. Wife. She froze. Just for a split second. Maybe only a few tenths of a second. Then, her ears turned bright red. The blush spread from her earlobes all the way across both ears. Perfectly even. Almost adorably sincere. It honestly looked like someone had secretly installed a timed heating device inside her ears. In the 3 years I'd known her, this was the first time I'd ever seen her like this. Every bit of that icy composure. Every relentless step she took toward cornering me. Every confident smile that made it seem like she controlled the entire game. Was an act. She'd been acting in front of me for a year and a half. Every single time, I secretly called her wife in my hometown dialect. She never even looked up from solving her homework. Now I've finally understood. Whenever she looked completely unfazed, her heart was probably doing exactly what mine did. A full-scale emotional earthquake. The only difference was that she was infinitely better at hiding it. And the moment I finally said it, looking straight into her eyes and calling her wife face to face, her defenses completely collapsed. She immediately lowered her head and pretended to check her phone. But there was no hiding those bright red ears. Under the September sunshine, they practically glowed like two little warning lights. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong with my heartbeat. It wasn't beating normally anymore. The weird part was, I couldn't stop smiling. For the rest of military training, the relationship between the two of us slipped into a strange new territory. We weren't officially together, but we definitely weren't just ordinary classmates anymore. Whenever we had a break, she would quietly walk over and simply stand beside me. I never said a word, and somehow, neither did she. The two of us would just stand side by side at the edge of the field, watching the other training squads drill in silence. Every now and then, she'd suddenly speak in my hometown dialect. Sometimes she'd ask if I wanted some water. Other times, she'd just casually complain about something completely unrelated, like today's food is seriously awful. I'd answer her in the same dialect. The classmates beside us were completely confused. What are you two even talking about? We're discussing today's training. I replied without changing my expression. Meanwhile, wingman Kikyung shot me a look from about 3 meters away. The kind of look that screamed, "Bro, you're absolutely killing it." Every time the instructor walked past us, he'd make an incredibly obvious effort to look anywhere except at us. It was so forced that it attracted more attention than simply staring at us. Total failure. Then military training finally came to an end. That night, all the freshmen from our home province gathered for dinner. More than a dozen of us squeezed around one huge round table. And guess who arranged the seating so my ice queen ended up right beside me? Yep, wingman Ki Chung. This guy had a supernatural talent for ruining my life, while somehow helping me at the exact same time. We ordered a yin-yang hot pot. And of course, he couldn't resist making a speech. You guys know what a yin-yang pot means, right? A perfect pair! Here's to my bro and his future wife living happily ever after. At that exact moment, I genuinely considered dunking his head into the spicy broth. For a solid 30 seconds. Halfway through dinner, Ki Kyung suddenly put down his chopsticks and picked up a glass of cola. Then he stood up with the seriousness of a man delivering a national address. Every eye at the table turned toward him. That was his special ability. No matter where we were, if he decided he wanted to speak, absolutely nobody could stop him. On behalf of everyone who's been dying to know. He raised his cola like it was a champagne toast. His face looked serious enough to present an Oscar. I'd like to ask sister-in-law one question. The mystery that's haunted our entire class since the first day of training. I kicked him under the table. I missed. How did you learn his hometown dialect? The whole table went silent. Honestly, everyone had been wondering that. Since the very first day. How could she possibly speak such an unbelievably obscure dialect? And more importantly, when did she even learn it? My ice queen quietly set down her chopsticks. Then she glanced at me. It wasn't a look asking for help. It was the kind of look that said, I'm about to tell them everything. Are you ready? I absolutely wasn't. But before I could stop her, she began. The year he transferred to another school. Her voice stayed perfectly calm, like she was telling a story that belonged to somebody else. He left without saying goodbye. So I asked our classmates where he came from. They mentioned the name of a place I'd never even heard of. She paused for a moment. Then I went home and searched for the local dialect. There were no tutorial videos. No dictionary. No learning materials whatsoever. That dialect was so obscure that even the internet barely acknowledged its existence. Everyone around the table had stopped eating. So I searched through QQ groups instead. And eventually, I found a hometown community. She calmly took a sip of water before continuing. There were only 7 people in that group. 5 of them were retired grandparents. Qi Chang's jaw literally dropped. I joined the group and told them I wanted to learn the dialect. One elderly man asked me, Young lady, why do you want to learn it? I told him, there is one sentence I wanted to say to someone important. Then he asked me, your boyfriend? I held my breath as she smiled faintly. I answered, I guess you could say that. The atmosphere around the entire table instantly changed. The very first sentence he ever taught me was how to say husband in your hometown dialect. I completely forgot how to breathe for about 3 seconds. That grandfather spent a year and a half teaching me the pronunciation over QQ, correcting every single tone, and practicing conversations with me. Every few days, he'd send me voice messages and make me repeat after him. If I got it wrong, we'd start all over again. She paused briefly. One time, I just couldn't pronounce a certain tone correctly. He sent me 17 voice messages in a row trying to fix it. The last one said, Young lady, is your tongue tied in a knot? Several people at the table burst into laughter. He also asked me once whether that boy knew I was learning his dialect. I told him no. She even copied the old man's tone perfectly. Even better, surprise him when the time comes. At that point, I could literally feel my temples pounding. A year and a half. Qi Chang repeated those words in disbelief. His cola was still raised in midair. He'd completely forgotten to take a sip. She quietly nodded. Then she delivered one final sentence. Still in that same calm voice. The grandfather's QQ username was 10th brother of the Shi family. Nobody else at the table reacted. But I did. The Shi family's 10th brother was my Uncle Lei. My father was the eldest son. My father was the eldest brother. That 10th brother of the Shi family, the retired old man who had been teaching my Ice Queen, my hometown dialect, wasn't a stranger. He was my own uncle, the same stone-faced military instructor, who'd made me run 15 laps on the training field. The same guy who heard my Ice Queen call me husband. And instantly slapped 5 extra punishment laps onto me without blinking. The Model X soldier, the embodiment of discipline, or so I thought. He'd known the truth for an entire year and a half. He knew there was a girl online, studying our family's obscure dialect, just so she could one day call his nephew husband. He personally corrected every single word she pronounced. For a year and a half. Then, on the very first day of military training, that girl finally stood in front of his nephew and said the one word she'd spent 18 months learning. Husband! My uncle walked over, face completely expressionless, then ordered his own nephew to run 15 laps. It was all an act. That cold, iron-faced instructor persona. That speech about no dating during military training. Every time she called me husband and I got punished, those extra laps weren't disciplined. He simply thought it was hilarious. That old troll had been following our relationship like it was his favorite romance series. For a year and a half. When the long-awaited finale finally aired, he couldn't resist joining the cast himself as the final boss instructor. And with that, he crushed the last tiny shred of dignity I still had in front of the girl I liked. Absolutely obliterated. One by one, everyone at the table finally figured it out. Ki-Chiang laughed first. Then the laughter spread across the table like falling dominoes. Nobody could stop it. Someone laughed so hard they splashed soup everywhere. Another person collapsed onto the table, completely losing it. Ki-Chiang actually slid off his chair. He was under the table, slapping the floor while laughing. I instinctively looked toward the restaurant entrance. My Uncle Lei had somehow appeared there, leaning against the doorway, arms folded. Maybe he was checking on discipline. Or maybe he'd come just to enjoy the ending in person. He noticed me staring. He simply lifted his chin ever so slightly. That was his version of saying hello. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. Just once. Barely noticeable. You would have missed it if you blinked. Then he turned around and left. His posture was flawless. Every step screamed military precision. Except for one tiny detail. His shoulders were shaking. That old man was laughing at me. I cursed him in our hometown dialect. My Ice Queen understood every word and quietly lowered her head, smiling as her ears turned red again. Ki Chang finally crawled back out from under the table, still holding his cola. I hereby declare this the greatest love story of the year. No competition! Everybody, cheers! The entire table raised their glasses, including me. What else could I do? Then came National Day, when our two families finally met for the very first time. My mom and Aunt Zoe hit it off the second they met. They started by talking about our high school years and college majors, then somehow jumped straight into our future after graduation. Should we stay in our hometown or settle somewhere else? The two of them chatted nonstop. You would have thought they'd known each other for decades. Not two mothers meeting for the first time. But two long-lost allies finally reunited after that day. My mom texted Aunt Jo more often. Then I texted my ice queen. Every morning they exchanged good morning. They shared weather updates, health articles. Sometimes they even sent screenshots of their chats to the two of us. See? This is what a stable relationship looks like. Then winter break arrived. I brought my ice queen back to my hometown. As the bus entered our little town, I spotted an entire welcoming committee waiting at the village entrance. My mom was standing right in the center like the main character. She was wearing a bright red winter coat I'd never seen before. She had obviously bought it just for today. The price tag was still sticking out from the collar. Next to her stood my dad, and beside him, my ice queen's mother. When did she even get here? Apparently, our moms had arranged everything behind our backs. I had absolutely no idea. Their information network operated on a level completely beyond my understanding. I gave up trying to keep track. The moment we got off the bus, my mom grabbed my ice queen's hand. She spent at least 15 straight minutes checking on her. Were you cold? Did you get enough sleep on the bus? Are you adjusting to the town? Did you get carsick? Is your coat warm enough? I stood beside them for those same 15 minutes. Not one person asked how I was doing. The only thing my mom said to me was, "Carry the luggage inside. Stop standing around." My dad just smiled the entire time. Honestly, I don't think I'd ever seen him smile that much before. Even while Mom was making such a scene, he didn't interrupt once. He simply looked completely satisfied. Meanwhile, Uncle Lay was standing a few meters away eating sunflower seeds. The way he looked at me felt like an artist proudly admiring his own masterpiece. His masterpiece. Then Ki Chiang blew up the class group chat. Breaking news! Our bro has returned home with sister-in-law. The welcoming ceremony at the village entrance looked bigger than New Year's TV. Both families have officially joined forces. So, when do we send the wedding money? I'm asking for everyone. Someone replied. I wasn't even there. This report comes exclusively from his uncle. Sure enough, Uncle A was secretly staring at his phone. I immediately left the group chat. 3 seconds later, my ice queen quietly added me back. As she did, her fingers lightly brushed the back of my hand. I couldn't tell if that was intentional, but my hand remembered the warmth anyway. That evening, Our entire extended family gathered around one huge dinner table. My mom and Aunt Zoe sat together, already discussing whether both families should vacation together next spring festival. They had already planned all the way into next year. Two middle-aged men who barely talked were suddenly arguing passionately over carbon fiber versus fiberglass rods. It was the most animated I'd ever seen either of them. Uncle Lay sat off to one side, teaching my Ice Queen yet another phrase in our hometown dialect. She repeated it perfectly. Honestly, her pronunciation was better than mine. The whole room burst into laughter, and sitting there, I suddenly realized something. Then it hit me. I had somehow become the worst person at speaking my own hometown dialect at this entire table. That dialect used to be my private secret passage, the only way I could quietly get closer to my Ice Queen. Now it had become everyone's language. It connected every single person in both of our families. Ironically, I was the only one left standing outside that door. But honestly, I didn't feel like I'd lost anything. She turned toward me and quietly asked in our dialect, "Why are you so quiet?" I looked at her. The warm light inside the room made a tiny strand of hair above her ears stick up just a little. I wasn't sure if it was static electricity or just pure coincidence. I didn't stare for very long, but definitely longer than normal social etiquette would allow. "Nothing," I whispered in our dialect. "I was just looking at my wife." This time, her ears didn't turn red. She simply smiled and quietly placed a piece of food into my bowl. Both of our moms immediately exchanged that unmistakable smile only mothers wear when they're completely satisfied with a young couple. Uncle Lay kept cracking sunflower seeds with his usual poker face, but the speed at which he was spitting out the shells had increased by at least 30%. Dude was absolutely trying not to laugh. Across the table, my dad lifted his teacup and looked at me. Then he gave me the tiniest nod. It was barely noticeable, but I understood exactly what it meant. Well done, my son. Even though, from beginning to end, I hadn't actually done anything. I'd basically spent this entire story getting combo attacked by everyone around me. But thanks for the recognition, Dad. Meanwhile, Ki-kyung posted his 28th message of the day in the class group chat. I glanced at it, and this time I didn't leave the group.